I was a renowned aloof tycoon in my circle, yet I found myself captivated by Dorothy Howard. She was a fair lady as unattainable as a flower on a high peak. I spared no expense to win her over. I nearly lost my life saving her younger brother and used millions to help her father pay his debt. All this was just to get her to agree to marry me. But after we got married, she cuckolded me. The child I lovingly raised for over 20 years was not mine, and they even poisoned me. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. When I was being poisoned, Dorothy stood there watching everything happen with a malicious gaze. Her words were, "It's all your fault. If not for you, Elvis O'Brien wouldn't have died. But we will still thank you." I struggled as if being shaken to wake up. Different images floated in front of my eyes. When I finally opened my eyes again, I was holding a bouquet of red roses and a diamond ring, kneeling on a knee. I found myself professing to her the same promise that had echoed around the circle for a decade. "Dorothy Howard, marry me. I will give you everything I have." My friends applauded, shouting, "Marry him, marry him." Contrary to their excitement, Dorothy looked disgusted. She glanced behind her at the approaching helicopter. It carried 22 gifts, the presents I had prepared for her birthday. She walked over to me with an indifferent expression and tossed the bouquet and the ring to the ground. It felt like a slap on my face and jolted me awake with pain. It was at that moment realized that I was reborn. In my previous life, everything was about Dorothy. To get her to marry me, I exhausted all my efforts to pay off her father's colossal gambling debts. I thought what I had was genuine love. I loved her with sincerity. Yet, in her eyes, I was just exploiting her father's unfortunate situation as a means to pressure her. Then, soon after the wedding, we had a baby. It was the pinnacle of my happiness. After all the decade-long life we shared made me feel that I had obtained her love. But what I didn't foresee was that the moment I took over the business of the Williams family, I was murdered by my son, while Dorothy stood there watching without guilt. She was on the brink of hysteria, her eyes filled with maliciousness when she looked at me. "You forced me, Tim. If not for you, I wouldn't have been separated from Elvis. He wouldn't have left abroad in heartbroken distress and met a tragic and untimely death. You made our son fatherless. All because of you. It's all because of you. You should die. And I will ensure the Williams family dies with you." The moment I closed my eyes, I wanted to laugh. The woman whom I had loved so deeply was, in fact, both foolish and evil. Elvis left for overseas simply because he used intimate photos with Dorothy to threaten me. To save her dignity, I paid him $10 million to ensure he would never show his face to us again. He messed up his own life while abroad. And now she's blaming me? How ridiculous. Tim, do you think you're something special just because you're rich? Do you think you can triumph over me by throwing your money around? What do you take me for? A plaything that can be bought when a rich man feels like splurging. The kind of love I'm looking for is one where we both cherish and are moved by each other. I have no interest in you. After turning me down, she shot a series of questions to me. The reality in them roused me from slumber. Indeed, she didn't love me. Even if we got married, her attitude towards me would remain unchanged. My proposal stirred so much anger in her, as though I had committed a grave mistake. However, this was how it was in my past life. I pursued her for a long time, but she never once bestowed on me a smile. But the day her younger brother fell seriously ill and needed a large amount of blood, she turned to me. A fool that I was, I pulled some strings and arranged blood from every bank in the city. But it wasn't enough. Her brother had a rare blood type and I happened to share it. Seeing her reduced to a crying mess broke my heart. I gave my blood to her brother. He lived, but I nearly lost my life in the process. After that day, she started showing me a bit of her smile. And later, she even agreed to be my girlfriend. Now, when I look back, it was probably for her younger brother. She took me as her brother's permanent mobile blood bank, for he might need blood in the future. My buddies mocked me, saying how a donkey must have kicked my head. To think I almost lost my life for a woman. But they wouldn't understand. I met her at the opening ceremony clad in a white dress and flowing hair, It etched deeply into my heart. No matter what others said, as long as she made a request, I had to fulfill it. All this happened without the knowledge of my family, the Williams. Had they known, the madness would have stopped long ago, saving a lot of distress. Fortunately, I've now reincarnated. I'm no longer the Tim Williams, the love-struck fool. I am Tim Williams, the successor of the powerful Williams family. Tim, if you truly love Dorothy, you should respect her, not force her into making choices. Indeed, Dorothy is only 22 years old. It is too early for her to get married. Your actions put her in a difficult position. Yeah. How did a nice birthday party turn into a proposal scene? Very bad luck. A group of Dorothy's close friends stood to the side, their hands on their hips, criticizing me. Looking at them, all dolled up and sparkling, I couldn't help but sneer. After all, everything they wore, daily necessities, and even their expenses when they went out were spent by me. And now they stood there, ridiculing me with such arrogance that it struck me bitterly. I applauded their audacity to question me. Were they not worried that I would cut off the money supply? I gazed coldly at the group of heavily made-up girls in front of me, without uttering a word. For a moment, the entire restaurant was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. I stood up and dusted off my trousers. To give her a grand birthday to save her from embarrassment in front of her friends, I did not hesitate to pawn an antique from my house, reserved the most luxurious rooftop restaurant, and even booked a private chopper to drop gifts and silk ribbons to her. She once told me that she loved ribbons made of silk. I went to lengths to fulfill her wish. But what about her? She stepped on my dignity in front of the guests. Seeing the chill emanating from me, her best friend pulled her arm and softly asked, "Dorothy, don't you think you went a bit too far today? Look at Tim's face, it doesn't look good. He spent so much money for your birthday, maybe. Who cares about his money? Just because he has some money, he thinks he can trample on my dignity?" Dorothy retorted with a look of disdain. She looked at me, her eyes full of indifference and mockery. It was the same in my past life. She spent my money, but she felt that my act of giving her money hurt her dignity. Her younger brother's operation and hospitalization fees were something her family could not afford. Yet all she said was how difficult it was for her parents, and how much she was suffering. After I gave her the money, she would say, "Do you think you're amazing just because you have money? This money is what you insisted on giving me, not what I asked for." Saying so, she angrily took the money. Looking at her hypocrisy, I could only blame myself and no one else. But all this is about to change. Since I've been reborn, I won't give her a chance to trample upon me. Hearing what Dorothy and her friends said, I simply told her off. "If you don't appreciate it, then go live your high and mighty life yourself." I calmly made my way to her side and stopped. "Since Miss Howard finds my actions so repulsive, then we shouldn't be together anymore." "Tim, you dare to say that again?" Dorothy's face was slightly red with anger, not expecting such a reaction from me. "Let's break up." I dusted off the invisible dirt and said calmly. Her face turned as dark as coal, her hand gripping my wrist tightly. As the standoff continued, a group of girls rushed over, chattering and bickering. "Tim, don't forget, you were the one who shamelessly pursued Dorothy. Now you want to break up all of a sudden? You scum. If you have the guts, be a man. Don't come crying for a reconciliation tomorrow." Dorothy looked at the indifference in my eyes and curtly left a word. "Tim, hope you keep your word." She huffed, but my heart seemed to bear no fluctuation. Since Dorothy and her group were acting up, I motioned the security to please them out. I was the one who paid for all this and didn't want to see unrelated people. Dorothy's eyes were full of shock. I looked nonchalant. The group of young ladies around her dragged away with a torrent of curses. Upon seeing me inviting my friends for a meal, Leo Kent questioned me intensely. "Are you not going to pursue her?" I poured myself a drink and looked at the dazzling moonlight completely unbothered. Leo seemed startled by my reaction. He touched my forehead with his hand. "You're not burning up. Perhaps we shouldn't have embarrassed you. We'll take 3 penalty shots to apologize. Please don't spite her because of us." It took you a lot of effort to chase her. I laughed at myself and explained, after kneeling for so long, one should eventually stand up. That night, we drank a lot together and chatted about the past. As we walked back to school with the cool night breeze hitting us, we saw Elvis wiping away Dorothy's tears at the school gate. Her shoulders were shaking due to sobs, looking every bit like a pitiful little princess. The me of the past had lost everything owing to such a look captivated her beauty. Looking back now, it was nothing but a skin-deep attraction. Moving on. The next day during P.E. class, I saw Elvis looking exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. He was sitting by the basketball court resting. I pulled Leo to sit on nearby chairs, drank some water, and enjoyed the breeze. As we sat down, Elvis saw me and started speaking loudly, perhaps to let me hear it. His roommate intentionally asked, "You didn't return the whole night. Your body must be drained, right?" Elvis just drank water and didn't answer. Then another question reached my ear. "Every time you guys stay in luxury hotels, who pays? Can you afford it with your allowance?" Elvis laughed merrily, his eyes scanning me up and down. "When we go out, Dorothy pays for everything. I have to save my allowance for when I study abroad." This was how most men liked to show off their wealthy girlfriends, rising to the pinnacle of life. His roommate hesitated for a few seconds and asked with furrowed brows, "Isn't Dorothy's money given by Tim?" Elvis turned to look at me with a humorous tone saying, "Tim's family is wealthy. This little money is nothing to them. As long as Dorothy frowns, the money will flow. Believe it or not, if Dorothy asked for their mall, it could be transferred immediately. It's well known that Tim spent tens of millions chasing Dorothy," Elvis said without mincing his words. Their conversation brought another enlightenment to me. So I was the rich fool in everyone's eyes? Regardless of the past, things were going to change now. I turned around and chuckled. "My hearing is quite sharp. You guys should avoid talking about this kind of matter in front of me." From who knows where, Elvis mustered up the courage to challenge me face to face. "Tim, I can leave if you want me to. I know you can't live, Dorothy. Here's my proposal. Give me $8 million and I'll disappear and never bother you guys again." I calmly took a sip of water and inquired, "Anything else?" Elvis, seemingly empowered, added, "If you're willing to provide me with a house in Massachusetts, it would show your sincerity. Your family can afford this anyway." His smirk almost made me lose control and land a punch on him, but I just smirked and remained silent. Since it was about teaching a lesson, I had something else in my mind. I dialed the head of the department's number and put it on speaker. "Director, about that Harvard exchange student opportunity you mentioned last time, I am willing to go." With a wide grin, the director said, "It's good that you want to go. You are the only one most qualified in our department. That Elvis you recommended couldn't even pass IELTS." I was racking my brains over this. The color drained from Elvis's face at this. "Wait, Tim, I didn't say I am not going. Just give me a little less. Just give me $2 million instead of $800,000. Elvis scurried over. This was an opportunity to go abroad. His family had been overjoyed when they heard about this. How could he let this fall through? He was about to snatch my phone when my icy glance made him back off. "No, wait, Tim, I am going abroad. You don't have to pay for me. Rest assured. I will stay away from Dorothy in the future." He said it, but too late. I ignored him completely. I never understood what was special about him that such a man was loved by Dorothy for a lifetime. Was it worth to despise me to the core for him? As I walked into the classroom for my elective course that evening, I could feel many eyes on me. As soon as Dorothy's best friend saw me and Leo enter the classroom in our sports uniforms, she covered her nose. She said in a cloyingly sweet tone, "What's that smell in the classroom?" Dorothy looked at me, clearly showing her disdain. I knew she was already used to me coming forward, apologizing with a smile on my face, begging for mercy, and giving gifts. It won't happen again. I remembered that it was the day to pay her younger brother's medical treatment fees. The money I gave her last time had long been squandered away. The cost of her younger brother's follow-up treatment was all paid by me every month. If I didn't transfer the money in time, the next month's medication would be interrupted. She seemed to not understand that her entire family had no blood ties with me. It appeared that she had also forgotten whose arms she slept last night. Unbothered, I walked straight to the farthest corner from them, busying myself with my phone. All of her friends' eyes are focused on me, their faces filled with disbelief. After a while, I heard someone exclaim, "Let's see how long he can keep up this act." I laughed, as if watching a group of fools perform, and told Leo, "Accompany me to the mall after class." Seemingly understanding, Dorothy's friends relaxed their furrowed brows. Our Dorothy is not the kind of girl who lets things slide easily. That's right. He must apologize in front of all the students. We can't let this matter just pass. Later, I will record a video and post it on the forum, so everyone can see what a toady looks like. They turned their heads and laughed loudly at me, as if they had made up their minds and figured out my thoughts. Dorothy glanced at me, with a smirk and mockery on her face. She obviously loved receiving gifts from me, but she still put on an aloof facade in front of everyone. The face that once filled me with joy now seemed rather ordinary. After class, I took off without looking back, pulling Leo with me. When I drove past Dorothy, I even gunned the engine. That face in the rearview mirror is becoming more and more repugnant to me. There was a house near the school that I had always wanted to buy and had been saving for it. It had a rooftop terrace that was quite suitable for hanging out with friends. But sadly, after meeting Dorothy, I couldn't save money at all. Instead, ended up spending all of the savings as well in a few months. I dared not tell my parents, fearing their anger. During that time, many of the expenses were secretly covered with the help of my buddies and selling stuff at home. In my previous life, after giving money for her brother's surgery and even the monthly transfers for follow-up treatment, she made me kneel and beg her before she reluctantly agreed. Even then, she put on airs and said, "This is on your own accord. You can't ask for it back later." She even recorded a video for future reference. Looking back now, it really wasn't worth it. In this life, I thought, wouldn't it be better to buy a house for myself? With this thought, soon the agent helped me complete all the procedures. I got the contract and was ready to go out with Leo to celebrate. Dorothy's mother called. Just like her daughter, she also took me and my money for granted. She angrily asked me over the phone, "Tim, why didn't you transfer the money to me? I have been waiting at the hospital all afternoon. My legs are numb." After letting her spout everything she had reserved, I coldly humphed, "I've broken up with Dorothy. Don't ask me for money anymore." Dorothy's mother panicked and anxiously asked, "How could you just break up like that? What are we supposed to do in the future?" She spoke so on and so forth. Her babbling almost burst my ears. I hung up and blocked her number. Leo, who had witnessed everything, patted my shoulder. "Tim, it seems that you're serious this time, even blocking your mother-in-law's call." I shrugged, slung his arm around my shoulder, and said, "Mother-in-law? That's in the past. Let's go. Time to drink." That night, Dorothy repeatedly called me, and a slew of messages expressing concern for a particular individual incessantly popped up. Leo saw that I had no intention of blacklisting her, questioning whether I would soften my heart. I chuckled. I just want her to experience what it felt like to be in my shoes. The paperwork for the house was not yet complete, so Leo and I, supporting each other, headed back to the dormitory. Standing at the entrance of the dormitory was a thin figure without a doubt. It was Dorothy. Upon seeing us coming, she ran over. Without a word, she swung a slap towards me, acting arrogant just like always. However, things were different now. I had changed. Seeing her action, I caught her hand in midair. "Miss Howard, your upbringing seems to be somewhat lacking. If this happens again, I wouldn't mind teaching you some manners on behalf of your parents." Dorothy's face turned crimson with anger. She was taken aback that I had dared to stop her, let alone talk back to her. In my past life, whenever she got angry, I used to appease her in all possible ways. Even if she hit or scolded me, I would just endure it like a lowly dog. "Tim, what do you mean by blocking my mother? You are fully aware that my younger brother is waiting for money for his treatment. A human life is at stake here. How can you just care about your happiness? The tone of her speech almost made it seem like I was the one who owed her. That was exactly her. I burst out laughing. Dorothy, let's be clear, we've already broken up. It's your brother. Why should I be spending money on his illness? The money I've spent on you is already plentiful. At that moment, Elvis, clad in pajamas, ran down and positioned herself in front of Dorothy. Tim, you must have misunderstood her. Nothing happened between us that night. Don't give her a hard time. Don't hold back the money for her brother's treatment. His heartfelt words moved Dorothy to tears. She held Elvis's arm, repeatedly thanking him. I felt like a complete fool, giving my all without any thanks. Meanwhile, Elvis's simple words moved her so much. The difference between loved and unloved was so clear. The look on Leo's face was that of seeing a clown when he saw the acting of Elvis and Dorothy. I slowly said, since you care so much for her and her family, Elvis, you should pay for it. As far as I know, your father's factory isn't doing so well. Why not sell it and use the money for her brother's treatment? At some point when we were arguing, a good number of classmates had gathered around. Everyone was whispering, waiting for Elvis's response. Now that he had demonstrated his deep emotions, he should give a response. Seeing his pale face, I couldn't help but laugh. Dorothy grabbed Elvis's arm and asked me loudly, who are you to push him? You all know his condition. I will solve my problems without any outsider's help. Leo and I couldn't help but applaud. I nodded and gave her a thumbs up. That's tenacity. The one who spent money, expended energy, and even risked life for her was me, only to be referred to as an outsider. Well, it served me right. The fool in this entire drama was me, who knowingly let her befool me. Since I'm a stranger to you, why do you always ask me for money? Do I seem like a philanthropist? In front of all these people, Dorothy's face turned pale. She bit her lip and said, I won't, not anymore. As she walked away with Elvis, she did not forget to glare at me. Tim, this time, don't think you can have your way. She spoke as if I had wronged her. This was just the beginning. Seeing her walking away, I remembered the day I died in the past life. 3 days after I broke up with her, the entire class was gazing at me during the specialized course class. The stares made the hair on my neck rise, and I gave a puzzled look to the class monitor. Considering our good relations, the class monitor patted my shoulder during the break. Sighing, he said, Tim, these days you were absent. The school forums exploded. I responded with a nonchalant, oh, I didn't pay attention to those forums, assuming it was another melodramatic love story everyone liked to discuss over meals. Leo, who loved browsing such stories, usually shared them with me. Seeing my calm face, the monitor pulled up the forum's homepage and showed it to me. His face was full of anticipation for my reaction, and I widened my eyes in surprise. At the top of the hot posts was, Computer Science Heartthrob Tim Dumps Girlfriend, withholding money for her family's medical treatment. Countless question marks floated. Clueless, I clicked on it. Comment 9,999. Looking at the avatar, there were Dorothy's best friends, lining up, topping the post to scold me. They said that despite my enormous wealth, I was extremely stingy with my girlfriend. When it came to life-threatening matters, I chose to hide. The night after I had a clear talk with Dorothy outside the dormitory, I moved into the newly purchased house with Leo. I was busy running around for ownership transfer procedures. I had blocked Dorothy. For me, she had become someone that I didn't need anymore. Unexpectedly, she spread rumors wantonly, attempting to attract my attention through public opinion. This time she did catch me off guard. Taking advantage of my ignoring her, she slandered me over the school forum. While I was going through the forum, looking at her masterpiece, Leo's call came. The first sentence he uttered was, "Have you seen the forum? They are really shameless." I responded indifferently with a After a round of ranting, Leo angrily asked, "Do you need me to contact my father?" Leo's father was a partner at a well-known law firm in North City. But my family wasn't to be trifled with either. Earlier I had kept my affair and money involved with Dorothy hidden from my family. This time around I decided to make them aware. I made a phone call back home and then shared the forum with my legal team. After being with Dorothy for so long, the credit card records of expensive items could be tracked. In less than half an hour, our legal team dispatched the expense list of lavish items I had purchased for Dorothy. There were also medical records and evidence of my blood donation for her brother's surgery that had almost cost me my life. Soon all of them were now laid before the public for their perusal. The netizens changed their tunes immediately in the face of such concrete evidence. Comments on the forum shifted to, "The campus beauty of B University of Technology unscrupulously slanders others. She's just another gold digger, trying to scapegoat the male protagonist." If it was in my previous life, my reaction to the comments would have been to apologize to Dorothy, even if it meant getting on my knees, comparing the present and the past. I remember once I suffered from acute gastroenteritis that day she insisted on buying a limited edition bag from a famous brand. She stood at the entrance of the shop, watching me sweat profusely from the pain, and said rudely, completely ignoring my pitiful appearance, "Can't you bear it for a while? It's about to go on sale. If we can't get this bag, we break up." The pain was so terrible that I nearly collapsed, but still accompanied her to buy the bag, which was priced at $20K. She left the mall with her new bag in hand, waving at me lightly. "You should take a cab to the hospital for your treatment. It's getting late. I need to go back to the dormitory for my beauty sleep." She left me alone just like that to seek treatment. That night, I sat alone in the infusion hall. While waiting for the drip to finish, I was browsing through my phone when at 1 a.m. she posted a grid photo of her new bag. Thinking of this, my left ventricle seized with pain. I asked myself, "Tim, you were a real lapdog in your past life. It is truly pitiful and lamentable." After the forum incident, when I stepped out of the classroom after class, I bumped into Dorothy. As usual, she was with her group of 4 or 5 friends. Dorothy was carrying 2 cups of bubble tea, smiling happily at me. Seeing her smile, Leo, who was silently standing beside me, woke up and rushed, pulling me ready to leave. His actions alerted Dorothy. She quickly rushed forward, grabbing my wrist and pleading, "Tim, can we talk?" I pulled away from her, my eyes cold and detached. "We don't have anything to talk about." The girls nearby began chattering. "Tim, you've gone far enough. Dorothy is even begging you now. What more do you want?" "That's right, you could at least give the money to Dorothy. Her brother is still waiting for treatment. We've even persuaded her. She bought you bubble tea. Can't you two just get along? We would be happy too." I couldn't help but find their antics hilarious and laughed while pointing at the group. "What will you be happy about? Do you think that if Dorothy and I make amends, you can continue to spend my money? All the luxury clothes and shoes you're wearing, you got them by leeching off Dorothy, right? What gives you the right to spend my money and then spread rumors about me and mock me?" I was very angry and annoyed at their attitude and behavior. Who did they think they were? Biting the hands that were feeding them. Dorothy was staring at me, her angry eyes filled with tears. After a long time, she managed to speak. "Tim, can I apologize to you? Will you take this cup of bubble tea and make amends with me?" Leo held his belly, laughing mockingly. "Dorothy, is your cup of bubble tea lined with gold? Why would anyone forgive you over a cup of bubble tea? You've been with Tim for so long. How many times have you secretly met Elvis behind his back? Have you lost count yourself? Also, Tim is not your pet dog, to be summoned and dismissed at your will. You better get lost." Dorothy, the school beauty, had been pursued by many since the beginning of the school year. Being with her, I had to protect her from head to toe. She had never been this humiliated. Hearing to the words of Leo, tears streamed down her face, and she sobbed, "Tim, I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" There were quite a few students surrounding us. Those who didn't know the situation probably thought I had wronged her. So I replied loudly, "Dorothy, we're already over. Save these tears and cry for the one you love." As if on cue, Elvis ran over with his bag on his back and positioned himself protectively before her. He pretended to disperse the crowd. "Everyone disperse, please. This is their private matter. What are you doing standing around here?" Dorothy, clutching the hem of his clothes as if he was her last lifeline, thanked him in a whisper. As always, even without any effort, just a few words from him could move her deeply. As I was about to leave with Leo, Elvis stopped me. "Tim, can't you see Dorothy is crying like this?" A hint of sarcasm crept onto my lips. "Aren't you here? You could probably comfort her better." Looking at the pair of lovers, "I have important things at hand, so I won't waste my time with you any longer." Elvis was still holding tightly onto my wrist, scrutinizing me for confirmation. Surprisingly, many people looked incredulous when they learned that I didn't side with Dorothy. My classmates all around were whispering about it, and some were even recording. Had it been in the past life, I would have smashed several phones on the spot already. But now I wished they could record more clearly and show everyone the embarrassing situation of Dorothy. After all, she was like a fallen idol, which was not something that could be seen often. Elvis surprisingly confirmed again. "Did you really give up on Dorothy?" I was irritated because I had to explain. "Can't you understand English? I broke up with her." Unexpectedly, Elvis said, "Tim, if it is because of me, I can disappear. Don't break up with her." Just when Dorothy thought he was still protecting her, Elvis showed his true colors. He almost begged, "Tim, the opportunity to study abroad is really important to me. Can you?" Dorothy and I had the same expressions at that moment. There was still a difference in our thoughts. I simply thought he was shameless while Dorothy was furious. She hammered his back repeatedly while screaming hysterically, "Elvis, what do you mean?" With a look of disgust, Elvis retorted, "Dorothy, without Tim, what will you have to support me?" His family was very poor, and the money for studying at university was borrowed from relatives and friends. But he was fairly good-looking, and Dorothy fell in love with him at first sight. He was right as long as Dorothy stayed with me. He wouldn't need to take part-time jobs like he had to in his first year of university. He would even be able to wear luxury clothing and create the image of a second-generation rich man in the social circle. I looked at him with disdain. That hideous face really didn't know what attracted her. "Elvis, the quota for studying abroad was originally mine. There's no discussion about giving it to you. I will definitely go, and you just live a good life with Dorothy." Saying so, I left amidst the noise. In my ear, I could hear Dorothy's questioning. In the past, she always vented her temper on me relentlessly. In this life, finally, my ears got a rare quietness. The events of that day were posted on the forum by some kind-hearted person. Of course, they twisted the facts. The hot post was that the second-generation god from the computer science department took advantage of his power to get the quota to study abroad, leaving the poor senior with no way out. When Leo scrolled on it, we were at home preparing for dinner. "This post might as well just state your name, Tim." He was filled with righteous indignation, wishing he could find the address of the person who posted it, rush there, grab the person by the collar, and ask if his eyes had problems. All I said indifferently was, "Let's eat first." I took a screenshot of the post with ease. These issues were not worth my involvement. Not later than half an hour, the department head posted all my awards and achievements since my freshman year on the school's official website. False rumors would debunk themselves, but the rumor spreader wasn't so lucky. That evening, our legal team reeled in the person who made the post. My proposed solution was to hand him over to the police. That night, Leo's phone was bombarded with calls. Like me, he had no choice but to block Dorothy. The next day, we were awakened by a forceful knocking on the door. Leo saw through the peephole and ran away as if he'd seen a ghost. I looked over in disbelief. Dorothy stood there with panda eyes outside my door, accompanied by her mother. The community's security left me with no choice but to complain. How could they allow strangers to get in without permission? She knocked over and over again, yelling out my name. If I didn't respond, the whole building would be echoing my name. I barely cracked open the door. They pushed me to enter my house and sat on the sofa. Her mother's face was indifferent. Noticing that I was rooted to the doorway, she spoke. Tim, pour me a glass of water. In my past life, after marrying Dorothy, I submissively obeyed her mother's every word. Her mother would often brag. Even with a large family like the Williams, their heir still serves me tea and water. Indeed, her mother, when visiting my house, even ordered my mother to make her juice. I replied coldly, "You entered my house without my permission. I can call the police." Dorothy's mother instantly lost her temper, pointing at me and threateningly saying, "I dare you to call. Remember, I'm your mother-in-law. You think highly of yourself." Leo rolled his eyes, showing no regard. "Excuse me, madam. Do you have a marriage certificate that states that your daughter married him? Tim is still single. Defamation is a serious crime, plus trespassing into a private residence. You'll be locked up for a few days." Dorothy's mother sneered, as though she had got the upper hand. "Tim, come on. Just transfer the money to me. If you want to beg, go to the road. I am not doing any charity." As soon as I finished, I contacted the property management. Her mother was so enraged she almost jumped. "Tim, you're shameless. You assured us that you would treat our daughter well, and then we agreed to let you be together. But now love is free. I don't want to continue. Is that okay?" Dorothy started crying again, pulling her mother and repeating over and over again, "Mom, your health is not good. Stop getting angry." She turned to me with teary eyes. "Tim, if you're mad at me, don't take it out on my mother. It hasn't been easy for her to raise me." Well, there it is, using the family card again. In the past life, every time her mother took a liking to anything, whether it was a house or a piece of jewelry, I had to buy it. They never considered my difficulties. Once at an auction, the starting bid for a painting was at $6 million, which rose up to $18 million by her mother. When I quipped, "Your mother doesn't understand art," Dorothy was furious. "My mother spent some money and you complain? Isn't it right for you to repay her for raising me?" It was obvious that she and her family took me for granted. Why would I have to repay when the person they raised was Dorothy? Those nightmares from my past life kept appearing in my brain. They always came along with a piercing pain. The property management soon rushed over. I made a gesture to them to show the mother-daughter duo the door, but they refused to leave. It wasn't until I picked up my phone to dial the police that her mother stood up and she started crying at my doorstep, attracting the attention of the neighbors. Her mother accused me tearfully of wronging her by breaking off the engagement and claimed that Dorothy was carrying my child. The neighbors were confused and kept patting her back to comfort her, and even tried to persuade me, "Young man, since the child is already on the way, live your life properly." If I remember correctly, in my previous life, Dorothy wasn't pregnant at this time. Reasoning with such a shrew is a lost cause, so the property management eventually had to escort them out. Afterward, Leo barged in with screenshots taken from the neighbor's house, restoring my dignity through his efforts. "Neighbors are not to be offended. They'll be there when you look up and when you look down," he quipped. Leo said cheerfully, with a silver tongue. I managed to convince the neighbors to berate Dorothy for her shamelessness. Linking shamelessness with the high and mighty school bell is indeed an intriguing piece of news. After dinner, Leo and I went to the police station. As the rumor monger Elvis was locked up, Dorothy was there too. When she saw me, stars twinkled in her eyes. "Tim, are you here to bail out Elvis?" Was her brain kicked by a donkey? I didn't want to deal with her at all. I walked into the interrogation room with my lawyer. When I came out, I couldn't help but smile. Elvis's lewd appearance and stubble on his face made me very delighted. In the interrogation room, he changed his usual demeanor, pleading, "Please sign the forgiveness letter. My record can't have a stain." He did all the misdeeds but wanted to save his image as the good boy. However, I was in no mood to consider anything or anybody. Giving him another jolt, I asked, "Did you find out who is the boss of that tech company you went is?" He paused for a while, then slowly said, "They said their boss's family name is Williams? Could it be?" I nodded. "Your internship has been canceled. and I will not sign the forgiveness letter. You always have to pay for your mistakes. No matter how much he pleaded, I didn't budge. As I was leaving, Dorothy followed me, repeatedly asking me, "Are you really that ruthless? Even if it's for the sake of the time we spent together, please forgive him." She said so, and it made me uneasy. I turned my head and asked back, "Don't tell me you want to go in there? Did you instigate those rumors?" The real character of Dorothy was only revealed to me in this lifetime. After dealing with this, I left the country ahead of time. The following events were all relayed to me by Leo. After Elvis came out, he began dating Dorothy officially. At that time, Dorothy did indeed have a baby in her belly. Eventually, her family agreed to their engagement. However, Elvis's job was not going well, and he often got physical with Dorothy when he returned home. Eventually, she fell and miscarried when she was more than 2 months pregnant. It turned out that Dorothy's uterine wall was thin, and she could not easily get pregnant because she had previously miscarried. This was not what I knew in my past life. I was told that she had blocked fallopian tubes, which made it hard for her to get pregnant. For her to feel better and not live in guilt of not having children, I underwent a vasectomy operation. In this life, I finished my studies and had a successful career. Dorothy appeared at the office building with a slightly bulging pregnant belly. It had been 3 years since I had seen her. 3 years could really bring huge changes. I remember that in my previous life, she still looked like a young girl, even when she was 40. But now she looked tired and haggard. I heard from Leo that things had been chaotic for her and Elvis since they tied the knot. Dorothy repeatedly caught him having affairs. However, she didn't dare to divorce, fearing the scandal would make her talk of the town, embarrassing her and her family. Everyone in B City knew Dorothy chose Elvis over me, who was a diamond bachelor. She thought her relationship with Elvis was all about love. Little did she know that without financial support, Elvis treated her no better than a maid. That day, seeing me in high spirits stunned her. "What's the matter?" I asked coldly. Only then did she recover, bending over to greet me with a smile. "Long time no see, Mr. Williams. I didn't want any more trouble." When I saw the resume of Dorothy, directly handed it to the HR department, I knew her purpose for coming. But I still held the same principle of not being a philanthropist. I couldn't help everyone. Before she could say a word, I responded, "The hiring decisions are made by our HR department. Since you weren't hired, please leave." Laying her hand on her belly, she let out a tear, which she couldn't hold back. Who would have thought, after all this time, that she still resorted to such tricks? "Mr. Williams, have some pity on me. I'm willing to be an office clerk. Our company always follows the rules. I, Tim Williams, am not a person who would overlook rules for anyone." Dorothy tried yet again, bringing up the past to appeal sympathies. "In consideration of our old friendship, lend me a hand. Did we ever share a connection?" Couldn't help but sneer. Those long days and nights, and the outcome of my previous life, I dare not forget. Before she could open her mouth, my fiancé walked over and took my hand. "Let's go. Our parents are waiting upstairs." I indifferently brushed past Dorothy. My fiancé, Wilma Charles, was introduced to me by my family during my 2nd year abroad. Our families matched in both social and financial status, and her personality was also likable. The most important part was that she was my superfan, following my footsteps to study abroad. This time, returning from my studies, I am to, well, in this life I found love. We got married, raised 2 sons, and grew old together. With collective effort from both sides, I've also brought my family business to the next level.